If I had known that saying yes would burn down my life, I would have let Isabella sleep in her car. It's funny how one small decision can flip your whole world upside down. Not even a dramatic decision either. Just answering the phone. I hadn't seen Isabella Cruz in almost 3 years. We'd grown up together in the same neighborhood in Atlanta. She was the type of friend who could talk her way into or out of anything, all charisma and quick smiles. In middle school, she was the one who convinced the lunch lady to give us extra pizza slices without paying. In high school, she talked the principal into letting us out of detention early. And in my 20s, she was the girl who could make a night at a dingy bar feel like a once-in-a-lifetime party. But Isabella also had a way of disappearing. She'd go radio silent for months, sometimes years. Then she'd pop back into my life like no time had passed. Usually with some wild story about where she'd been. That last time we'd spoken, she'd been living with a boyfriend in another state, and then, just like that, she stopped answering my calls. So when my phone lit up that rainy Thursday night with Isabella across the screen, my first instinct was to let it ring. But there was this small part of me, buried under all the you-should-know-better instincts, that still remembered the friend who once sat on the floor of my bedroom with me the night my mom's cancer came back, eating chips and keeping me company because she wasn't going to let me be sad alone. I answered. "Selena?" Her voice was thin, almost trembling. "I know this is out of nowhere, but I need a place to stay, just for a little while." She talked fast, giving me the Cliff Notes version. Her apartment lease fell through. She was between jobs. She didn't have any family who could take her in. I asked about her mom, Mrs. Cruz. Isabella dodged the question, said she'd explain later. Looking back, there were so many red flags in that single phone call, but I told myself it was temporary, a couple weeks at most. Just until she got back on her feet, so I said yes. By Saturday morning, she was at my door. It wasn't just a couple of bags. She had 2 full suitcases, a duffel, a big tote overflowing with makeup, and a laundry basket stuffed with random things like kitchen utensils, candles, and a stack of celebrity gossip magazines. "Girl, you are saving my life," she said, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. She made herself at home immediately. She dropped her bags in the guest room, kicked off her shoes, and went straight to my kitchen to make coffee. Within an hour, she'd turned on music, lit one of my candles, and started telling me about some fight she'd had with a former roommate. At first, it felt kind of nice. I lived alone. Well, just me and my boyfriend, Andre, who stayed over most nights. The apartment had been quiet lately. Having Isabella there added energy, like an instant shot of caffeine. She was funny, dramatic in the best way, and knew how to make me laugh. Andre seemed fine with it too at first. The 3 of us even had a little dinner together that first week. Tacos, wine, some Netflix movie in the background. It almost felt like being back in my early 20s, when everything was spontaneous and friendships felt permanent. But small things started to bother me. She borrowed my hair products without asking. At first, I didn't care. I mean, it's just shampoo. But then she started using my face cream, my expensive serums, my perfume. I'd find my lipstick in her bag, my nail polish in her room. She left dishes to soak in the sink for 2 days straight. Laundry piles appeared on the couch. She'd blast music while I was on work calls. The first real boundary crossing, though, came one Thursday afternoon. I'd gotten home early from work, a rare half day, and when I walked into my bedroom, there she was. Not the guest room. My room. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, scrolling through her phone. "Oh, hey," she said, barely looking up. "Better lighting in here." Better lighting? In my bedroom? I stood there for a second, not knowing what to say. She didn't move, didn't apologize, just kept scrolling. That night, I told Andre about it. He just shrugged. "She's just getting comfortable," he said. But that was exactly what bothered me. She was getting comfortable in a situation that was supposed to be temporary. The next morning, at lunch with my coworker Keisha, I told her the whole thing. Keisha, who never sugarcoats anything, gave me a look and said, "Temporary guests turn into permanent problems if you let them." At the time, I laughed it off. But those words would replay in my head over and over in the months that followed. By the end of that first month, Isabella had gotten her own key to my apartment. rearranged the living room furniture for better flow, left grocery lists for me on the fridge like I was her personal shopper, started making comments about how she could help me decorate the place if she stayed a little longer. She wasn't acting like a guest anymore. She was acting like she lived there. And deep down, I think I knew. I'd just opened the door to a problem I wasn't going to be able to close easily. When Isabella first moved in, she told me she was between jobs, but had interviews lined up. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. For weeks, I'd leave for my office job at 8 a.m., and she'd still be in her pajamas, sipping coffee and scrolling her phone. At first, I told myself she just had different hours. But after a month, I started to notice a pattern. No early alarms, no interview clothes laid out, no wish me luck texts, just her lounging around, watching shows, and ordering things online. The first time she came to my job, I didn't invite her. I was at my desk at the logistics company where I work as an office administrator. It was mid-morning, and I was knee-deep in purchase orders when I heard a laugh I recognized instantly. I looked up, and there she was, Isabella, standing in the doorway to my cubicle, holding 2 Starbucks drinks like she was delivering some kind of treat. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said, placing 1 cup on my desk. I smiled, mostly because my supervisor, Victor Alvarez, was standing nearby. He gave a polite nod but didn't look thrilled. After she left, Victor leaned in and said quietly, "Selena, we have a no visitors policy during work hours." I mumbled an apology, embarrassed. It didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, she came back, this time during lunch, and hung around the break room, chatting with Keisha and a couple of my other coworkers. Keisha later pulled me aside and said, "She's cool and all, but why is she acting like she works here?" I didn't have an answer. Then borrowing money started as well. "Hey, can I borrow $20 just until Friday? Can you spot me for lunch? I left my wallet at home. My card's acting weird. Can you get this one?" At first, I didn't mind. Friends help friends. But Friday came and went, and the $20 never came back. Then it was $50, then $100. When I finally asked about it, she brushed it off with a laugh. "Girl, I'll get you back. I just gotta get through this month." Around this time, Andre started acting different, not in a huge, obvious way, just little shifts. He'd linger in the kitchen talking to Isabella when I was in the shower. He started watching the same shows she liked, ones he'd never cared about before. One night, I walked into the living room and found the 2 of them sitting close on the couch, laughing about some TikTok video. Nothing happened. Not that I saw, but the air felt heavier than it should have. Keisha noticed it too. We were out for lunch one Friday when she asked, "You ever think maybe she's trying to get a little too comfortable with Andre?" I scoffed. No, she wouldn't do that. Keisha just shrugged. People get funny when they're living rent-free. Then came the night that really stuck with me. We were hosting a small get-together, just a couple of Andre's friends, some drinks, music in the background. At one point, Isabella sat down right next to Andre, touching his arm while telling a story. It wasn't the kind of touch you do by accident. I caught Andre glancing at me, almost like he was checking if I'd noticed. I did. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Something was shifting, and I could feel it. Isabella wasn't just living in my apartment anymore. She was bleeding into my work, my friendships, and now, my relationship. And the worst part? She was doing it all with that same warm smile, like none of it meant anything. By the time March rolled around, my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. My framed photos had been moved to make room for Isabella's. My favorite mug was now hers. She kept my Netflix logged into her profile, and my grocery bill had almost doubled. But the real trouble started when she found her way into my work life again, in a way I couldn't just laugh off. Once a quarter, our logistics company hosts a casual after-hours event for employees. Food, drinks, mingling. It's meant to be internal only, but since it was being held at a public rooftop bar downtown, technically anyone could walk in. I had told Andre about it weeks before, but I never mentioned it to Isabella. Or at least, I didn't think I had. But sure enough, 30 minutes into the event, I spotted her across the bar, in a bright red dress, holding a martini, laughing with a group of my coworkers. My stomach sank. When I walked over, she grinned like she'd been invited. Keisha told me about this. I figured, why not come say hi? Keisha, standing next to her, shot me an apologetic look. I didn't think she'd actually show up. It got worse. Isabella spent most of the evening hopping from group to group, inserting herself into conversations, and, worst of all, telling stories about me that I had never given her permission to share. Embarrassing ones. The kind that make people laugh, but also look at you a little differently. At one point, I overheard her telling Victor, my boss, about how Selena used to be a total party girl and could drink anyone under the table. She even made a joke about me probably filing expense reports with wine in hand. Victor laughed politely, but his eyes flicked toward me in a way that made my face burn. The following Monday, Victor called me into his office. Selena, I just want to remind you about maintaining a professional image, both inside and outside the office, he said. He didn't mention Isabella by name, but I knew exactly where this was coming from. I nodded, biting my tongue. One night, I opened my wallet to grab cash for the vending machine and noticed a $50 bill missing. I knew I'd had it earlier that week. I asked Andre if he'd borrowed it. He said no. I asked Isabella, and she laughed. Girl, if I wanted $50, I'd just ask. You know I'm broke. But the way she said it, too quick, too dismissive, made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the money. Little things started disappearing. A bottle of wine I'd been saving, the earrings my aunt gave me for my birthday, even one of Andre's jackets. Whenever I asked, Isabella had some breezy explanation. Andre's behavior had shifted, too. He was home less, started working late more often. His phone, which used to sit face up on the counter, was now always in his pocket. When I'd ask about his day, his answers were short, distracted. One Friday night, I came home to find the two of them in the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter, holding a glass of wine, and he was standing close, closer than I liked, laughing at something she said. When they noticed me, they stepped apart. Too quickly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image in my head, the angle of her body toward his, the way he'd smiled. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but I could feel the ground shifting under me. The breaking point came the following weekend. Andre said he was going to watch a game with a friend. A couple of hours later, I got a text from Keisha. You at that bar on Peachtree? Just saw Isabella here with some guy. Thought it might be Andre at first. My chest went cold. I asked what she meant. Nah, it wasn't Andre. But she was real cozy with this guy. Looked like a date. I didn't know what to think. If she was seeing someone else, what was going on with Andre? And why did it feel like both of them were keeping something from me? That night, when Isabella came home, I asked her how her day was. She smiled, said she'd just been running errands. No mention of the bar, no mention of the guy. And in that moment, I realized she could stand right in front of me, lie to my face, and not even blink. The night it all came apart didn't start as a fight. It started as a normal Tuesday. I came home from work, tired but ready to finally have a quiet night. Andre was on the couch, scrolling his phone. Isabella was in the kitchen making pasta, humming to herself like she owned the place. Something in me had been boiling for weeks, and I didn't even realize how close it was to spilling over. Halfway through dinner, Andre got a text. His phone buzzed twice, screen lighting up. Normally, I wouldn't have paid attention, but this time, I caught a glimpse. It was Isabella's name, and she was sitting right across from us. My stomach dropped. I set my fork down. Why are you texting each other when you're in the same room? They both froze for a split second. Not long, but long enough for me to catch it. Andre said, "Oh, she was just sending me a recipe link." Isabella laughed. "Yeah, I found this pasta trick on TikTok. Chill, Selena." But something in my chest snapped. I pushed back from the table. How long has this been going on? Andre's face twisted. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Silence. Isabella was the first to speak. You're overreacting. Nothing's going on. I don't even remember what I said after that. The words tumbled out faster than I could control them. Weeks of frustration, embarrassment, and suspicion all coming out in one messy, shaking voice. About her showing up at my job. About the money. About the way she talked to Andre. About the lies. Andre sat there, jaw tight, saying almost nothing. Isabella, on the other hand, started throwing it back at me. How I'd changed. How I was paranoid. How she'd just been trying to help. Around the apartment. Finally, Andre spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. "She's right, you know. You've been on edge for months. You're always looking for a problem." I stared at him, the weight of his words hitting harder than anything Isabella had said. That was my answer. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I just stood up, went to my bedroom, and started pulling Isabella's things into her duffel bag. She followed me down the hall, her tone changing from defensive to mocking. "Wow, really? Kicking me out over nothing? You're pathetic." I didn't look at her. I just kept packing. By the time I was done, Andre was standing in the doorway, watching. I handed Isabella the bag and said, "Get out." She smirked. Fine, I was leaving soon anyway. When the door closed behind her, the silence in the apartment felt heavy. Andre stayed for another week. We barely spoke. And then one Friday evening, he came home, sat down, and said, "This isn't working." I didn't fight him. The weeks after felt strange. The apartment was quiet again, painfully so at first. I'd find random traces of her, a hair tie under the couch, an empty perfume bottle in the bathroom, a grocery list still stuck to the fridge. I blocked her number. I didn't bother trying to get the money back. Keisha came over one night with wine, and when I told her everything, she shook her head. "You let her in because you remembered who she used to be. But people change, Selena, sometimes not for the better." It's been 6 months now. I don't know where Isabella is. Last I heard, she was living with a friend, which I suspect means another person who's about to learn the same lesson I did. Andre? We haven't spoken. I don't even think about him much anymore. Sometimes I still replay those last weeks in my head, wondering if there was a moment I could have stopped it from happening. But the truth is, once someone starts eroding your boundaries, it's hard to see how far they've gotten until there's nothing left. The last thing Isabella ever said to me, "You're pathetic," doesn't sting anymore. Now it just reminds me of how far I've come from that night. Because the real lesson wasn't about her. Or Andre. It was about me finally learning when to close the door and lock it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe for more content. If you want to share your stories, please comment below. Additionally, what is your opinion on the poster's decision?